Welcome to another session. I hope you were well. I'm going to be speaking on a topic today that I will pose as a question. The question in itself is not a standalone question. It connects to the conversations I have been having over the past two sessions. It's a simple one. It's directed at women. The question is, if you consider yourself to be a good woman, and you are in that group of women who consider themselves to be quite valuable and quite special, but you are still unmarried and therefore living your life as a single person, or unmarried but in a relationship of whatever significance you have, a simple question is, why are you, though a good woman, still in the marketplace? Now, let me put that question to one side and I'll juxtapose that with an analogy that perhaps will be a useful comparison. If you've ever shopped at perhaps a high street shop, you walk into a shop and there are products on the shelf. There are certain products that have very short shelf lives. There are products that have much longer shelf lives. Now, irrespective of what product you are looking at, there are some products that are acquired relatively quickly. On the other hand, there are some that sit on the shelf for much, much longer. The former are those that the buyers desire and feel that the price or the exchange requirement is fair. And so, demand supply plays a huge part. There is the demand, there is the supply. The price intersects both concepts, and the price is relatively comparable to the value promised by the product and received by the recipient. There are other products, on the other hand, that despite their price, whatever that price is, the buyers do not acquire said products for whatever reason. So you tend to find it sits on the shelf for such a long time before it is sold, if it is sold, and sometimes if it isn't sold by its sell-by date or its best before date, suddenly you have a reduction in price. And whenever you have a reduction in price of a considerable amount, sometimes it gets bought by someone. Men and women in the marketplace of what I call the sexual marketplace, or the dating marketplace, or the relationship marketplace, are like products. Now, this is perhaps not a great comparison, but because by doing so, there is a feeling that I am calling human beings objects. I like to say, I am. Men and women are objects. We are animated objects. I hope that rings a bell. We are animated objects. But within the marketplace of relationships, we classify each other under different groups. Men see women primarily, and this is sometimes not exclusively related to this particular perspective, but men see women as sexual objects. There are several other ways men see women: inspirational objects, reproduction objects, companion objects, resourceful objects, let's say partnership objects. It goes on and on, but at the initial glance, a woman is a sexual object from a man's perspective. We have to desire you and find you attractive, to want you. Men, on the other hand, are seen by women as success or resource objects. Now, I'm talking about in the main, in the general. So, the analogy I gave can be used because effectively what we're saying is, in the sexual marketplace, there are men in the marketplace looking for companions or looking for an experience. There are also women in the marketplace looking for companionship or looking for an experience. Both parties are like items on a shelf. And on the shelf, whether that be in a local gym or on the high street or in a nightclub, in a coffee shop, wherever you might interact with people, walking down, let's say, a park, you are on the shelf. Initially, when men see women, we do not know, except you have a symbol, we do not know if you are on the marketplace, but you are on the shelf. We don't know your intentions. You could be on the marketplace looking for something, or you could actually have been taken, but still socially interacting. The key question, however, is this. If women, such as I have been, I guess, over the years, drawn to, and I have been told that there are so many great women and good women out there, a question is a simple one. If you are a good woman, and if there are so many good women out there, why are they still on the market? Now, hold that question, because I'm going to bring into today's conversation the two topics that I covered over the past two sessions. Now, if you haven't seen any of these sessions, I think it will help a lot. Women are on the market, and if we compare that to the analogy I gave, because men are refusing to buy what women are offering, the value exchange proposition is considered by the men to be unattractive. And so women are on the marketplace because there are no men willing to accept what they consider to be an unfair deal, an unfair advantage to the women. Now, let me say something else that I think is important. You might be in a relationship, and I know women who are in relationships with men and are still unmarried. And so there's a mistake that is made by women in referring to the fact that they are not single as some form of something to be lauded. I use the word unmarried more often than I use the word single for a specific reason. In categorizing the groups that we should fall into, the first is unmarried, the second is married, the third is widowed, and the fourth is divorced. We fall into one of four categories. Single is a new term that we have been using over the past 40, 50 years. You may not be single because you are dating someone or in a relationship with someone, but you are still unmarried. And here is the key thing. The women who are unmarried or who are in a relationship might say, well, I am in a relationship and therefore the conversation does not apply to me. I'm sorry to say this, that it really applies to everyone who is unmarried. Here is perhaps something to juxtapose with what I've shared so far. Across the board, across geographies, across histories, across time, when women have been asked what they want from a relationship, and they've been able to describe in words what they want from a relationship, what we have been able to aggregate is as follows. That women are looking to consolidate on men who they admire, men who they respect, men who ideally they honor, and men who they desire. Those men are considered by most women to be men of value. So the question is not necessarily whether you are single or unmarried. The question is, are you with a man who you admire, respect, care for, and ideally honor? And here's the key part. Is that person of value to the rest of the, I might use the word, to the group of men? So we're playing a game of, it's a two-part game. The man in question has to be a man who has attained a level of, I wouldn't use the word socioeconomic value, but he has to have come to his own. In other words, he's become aware of his masculinity. He has to be ready. That's his individual charge. But also he then has to be placed in a group of other men. And the men in the group must identify and see and acknowledge that he is of value. In other words, there's a hierarchy amongst men. And other men consider him to be of a level in that hierarchy where he is admired by other men in the same group. The woman then comes into the picture. She finds the man whom other men say is valuable. She finds that man attractive. She respects him. She desires him, and ideally she honors him. Think about that scenario. If a man meets all of this criteria, what we have found and what I have observed is rarely do said men propose or initiate relationships with a woman and get turned down. In other words, let me make a very clear distinction. I talk about dating and I talk about relationships. In the session I did yesterday, I made it very clear that a man's tolerance and threshold for dating is so low. But when it comes to relationships, it's much higher. Women, on the other hand, have a similar threshold for dating or relationships. A distinction from a male's perspective, dating is synonymous with just having sex. So when a man is dating a woman, he doesn't go around telling other men that he's dating the woman, because dating to men simply means I'm having sex with her. We say nothing. When we are in a relationship with you, an emotionally significant relationship, then we tell other men and we define the relationship we have with you and we name the relationship. So keep a key distinction in mind. I'm not referring to people who are dating. I'm referring to those in a relationship of some significance. Now, my specific reference, as I have done on this channel over the years, is marriage. I use other derivatives such as civil partnership, legal, any form of legal, state, or you might say faith-based union, state marriage, Christian marriage, a marriage under the Hindu tradition or Islam tradition, or a Jewish marriage, or something similar. Civil partnership that is formalized. I'm not referring to just cohabiting with someone for 5 years, 6 years, 4 years, 10 years, 15 years, and having no, formal professing of the man's love. So, two separate categories. I'm speaking about the latter. Marriages. That's how you can keep score. In other words, the key distinction here is as follows. In the dating marketplace, the woman is the gatekeeper. She holds the keys. Man or men are seeking access to the woman's emotions, access to her body, and sometimes access to her womb. A woman gatekeeps those 3 gates. She chooses who she gives access to, her emotions, who she gives access to her body, and also who she actually brings life into the next generation for. Men, on the other hand, we are gatekeepers to who we choose to come into union with, legally and formally. So we decide when we go on one knees, on both knees, on no knees, but when we invite a woman to join in our journey, whether that be by professing a love in the presence of people or by formalizing the union in the presence of the state, however you choose to do that. But men are gatekeepers to marriage and relationships. So what you find here is a simple one. When women say I'm single by choice, a woman cannot be single by choice, except in the dating marketplace. Because in the dating marketplace, she holds the keys. So she can simply say, I am in the dating marketplace. I don't want any I'm emotionally unavailable. I don't want to have any physical sexual contact, and I don't want to reproduce. That's her choice. But when it comes to relationships, and if a woman desires to be in a relationship, if she's not voluntarily celibate, then she cannot say I am single by choice if her desire is a relationship or marriage. The reason being, the man gets to choose. The man is the gatekeeper. Now, I have explained all of this to make a point. Women do not reject proposals or offers from men who they admire, who they desire, who they honor, ideally, and providing those men are also honored and esteemed by other men, women seldom reject proposals from those men. That's the first thing to state. It's unusual. It seldom happens. And so the key part of the whole question is a simple one. When a person of value, who's a man, who is ready for a significant relationship, emotionally involved, he ideally wants to be married. He doesn't chase a woman endlessly. As a matter of fact, let me give you ladies a clue. If the man in your life could be loving, could be kind, could be nurturing, could be intelligent, a man who understands his value and who has come to his masculinity, providing he has not been feminized and he wasn't raised in the absence of a male role model, you will find if that man is of age, I use 35 as a guide, and he's actually gone through his temptations and his failures, and he's achieved a level of success, and he's actually gone through and understands and is now wearing what I call the masculine frame, such men understand their worth. They understand their value. Those men, for some reason, I can't explain why, but for whatever reason, seem to be acknowledged by other men in the same vicinity. And what we have found is that they make up a very small percentage of all men in any society, in any geography, in any location, and across time. At best, you're looking at roughly 15% or less. So there are fewer of those men, but beauty, on the other hand, I wouldn't use the word a commodity, but it's commoditized. There are fewer men who have achieved a level of hierarchy, and there are more women who have beauty. So it's a demand-supply issue. When those men who have reached a level of maturity and esteem, leadership, position, and influence extend a hand, a proposal, an invitation, either to join in union or to go through the process of seeing whether they can be united. When that is extended to most women, if the woman admires, respects, and honors that man, she seldom says no. So if you are in a relationship, and the relationship has been going on for a number of years, or even months, ask yourself one of two questions. Number one, do I admire this man? Do I honor this man? Do I respect this man? First question. Second question, is the man, if I took him and I placed him amongst other men, across geographies, across nation states, would he be placed by other men on a hierarchy that demonstrates and says that he is someone of a much higher value? In other words, women don't get to choose the value of a man. Men get to choose the value amongst the group. This is a key distinction. A man gets to choose who his leader is. So if you lined up 100 men and we all sat together, myself included, if we came into the same space around the same time, within a few minutes, sometimes hours, sometimes days, we start to put ourselves in a hierarchy. We start to read ourselves. It's not always about money. It's not always about resources. It's not always about intelligence. It's not always about the tangible benefits. Sometimes it's not always about character. It's not always about experience. It's not always about age. But in a very fascinating way, we start to test ourselves to understand where we are placed in that hierarchy. Sometimes it's very covert, sometimes it's quite overt. But in a short number of hours, days, or months, what you find is there's a consensus amongst the men as to who. It's more like an idea where you have a meritocratic approach, where the men say, well, certain people, based on their lived experiences and knowledge and demeanor and character, they have a level of believability. Now, understand something. It's not always correct, but there'll be a choice everyone has, and suddenly you find there's a consensus. There's a best fit line, and maybe 10% of the men or 15% of the men will be chosen as the ones to go to, the ones to be believed, the ones who have the influence, the ability to inspire, educate, lead, and those men will become the ones who are called the elders amongst the group. And then you then have a cascading effect of hierarchy. So the men of the top, on the top, chosen by other men, we call those men the men of, let's use the word higher socioeconomic value, of higher value. A woman who finds him attractive, who desires him, who respects him, who honors him, seldom rejects a proposal when he says, I like you, I would like you to join with me in a union. I'd like to pair bond with you for marriage. Seldom do women say no. So if you are in a relationship as a woman and you've been dating someone for a long time, then one of three issues. He is not of value by consideration of other men. Number two, you do not admire, respect him. You might love him, but you may not honor him. You may not respect him. You may not even desire him. Number three, as a result of 1 and 2, he might be your seconds. I talk about seconds. In other words, you settled for the men you admire, respect, and desire do not want you. And the key question is why? Because if you can understand the question why, you can solve the puzzle, and therefore you can find a solution that might be to your advantage. So here's where we begin today's session, despite me going on for a number of minutes. If the question is answered as put forward, and you find that you are still on the market, you are a good woman, or you consider yourself a good woman, your friends and loved ones consider you a good woman, but for some reason, you're still single, you're still unmarried. The question is why? Well, 2 sessions ago, I talked about a woman's value. I also talked about a man's value. I dwelt more on the women because I was speaking from a man's perspective. And the idea was to enable women to understand how men think. When men reject women, we're not very vocal. We're not very good at communicating our reasons. So for example, I go out to a bar and I meet 4 girls. And let's say I exchange numbers with all 4. And they're all equally just as attractive. And I go out on a date with the first one. Nothing sexual, just on a date. And the second one, and the third one. If I do that for about 4 weeks, regularly, suddenly I will put all 4 women into a hierarchy. Remember, they are all equally as attractive. So I will use a different criteria. But at some point, I might drop 1 or 2 from, you might say, the list, if my intention was marriage. Most of the time, men do not tell women why they drop them and move on. They don't. We'll use things, to make you feel better, such as, I'm going through my issues. It's not you, it's me. I have this. I'm not ready in the right place. And I often say to my female friends to consider 2 things. Whenever a man says, this has to end, or I'm not ready to get married, there should be 2 questions, and that should be follow-up questions. But there should be 2 answers you're looking for as part of the follow-up question. What he's saying in effect is as follows. I'm not ready to get married to you. That's the first. Second, right now. So at both of them, he's saying, I'm not ready to get married to you. I'm not getting ready to get married right now. And I'm not ready to get married to you right now. The right woman, which is why women sometimes find it strange. A woman can date a man for 10 years, 12 years, 6 years, and they break up, and within 3 months, he meets another woman, and he's married. And 3 months later on, he has kids. Now, this might be the same man who has said for years and years and years, I don't want to be a father. I don't want to actually be a father with you. But what he's saying, indirectly, he's not saying, I don't want to be married, and I don't want to be a father. He's just simply saying, with you, I don't want to be married. Not right now. I don't want to be married to you. With the right woman, who he values, a man changes his position. I have seen this with my friends. Men who have said, I don't want to have kids. I don't want to be married. They are with women for long. They meet another woman and they suddenly, the light switches on. Suddenly, they speak in a different language. The reason? They have met a woman of value. Who they value. The key question for women, therefore, is, if I am a good woman, why am I still on the market? And what do men value in a woman? You see, what happens, generally speaking, is we've raised over the past 50, 60, 70 years. In the West, we've conditioned women to believe that they are the most important thing since sliced bread. So women have been raised not to care for what men desire, what we want. Men are seen as disposable. So what you tend to find is it's not unusual for a woman to think that she's all that. You meet women, and I've seldom met a woman and asked a simple question. On a hierarchy from 0 to 10, if you were to rate yourself based on just your purely how you look, your natural looks, what rating would you give yourself? I always find women tend to say, I'm a 9 or I'm a 10. In other words, I'm almost perfect. Sometimes these women, interestingly, see themselves in the mirror, and for some reason, it's almost as though we've raised women to think that there is no relative value amongst women. So you see a woman who is very attractive, and you ask her, what would you rank yourself? And she says a 10. And next to her, you see a woman who is relatively average in looks. And the woman who's average says, I rank myself as a 10. And then you ask both of them to rank each other, and they both give each other a 10. It's almost as though this is just some empowerment mantra, almost a brainwashing. In any case, what we're finding is that when women say, I'm a good woman, but I'm still unmarried, and I don't know why, what she's indicating by that proclamation is that she doesn't understand how men think and what men want. Because if you understand how men think and what men want, it's very easy, if you have come to a place where you're happy to give men what they want, it's very easy to find a union with someone and have a relationship of emotional significance and value. Men who are of a certain value, having been valued by other men, do not chase women. Let me make it very clear. Key distinction. I know a number of people, and I have met people over the years, and I've seen men who have lorded over women, and I've sat back and I've said, well, he's not of age. He hasn't come to the age of reason. He's still very young. And if you understand the concept that I have shared so many months and years ago about the balance of power in a relationship, the younger the woman is, the more she has more of what men want. Youth, beauty, femininity, chastity, and most importantly, what's between her legs. Men desire sex so badly that we will sell our birthright just for a taste of the cookie. But the younger we are as men, the less value we have, because we only have potential, so we have nothing to offer. And it's not unusual to find that a woman who is in her late 20s or early 30s will have a man who is of a similar age lording over her. And the reason is simple. He hasn't come to age 35, and he hasn't come to the age of reason. He hasn't failed. He hasn't come into his masculinity. He hasn't discovered his purpose. He doesn't know his value. He hasn't actually reached a level of financial independence and success. And therefore, he seeks success in a woman, whereas he should seek for success in himself. He is not fulfilled. When a man has found his purpose comes first. His dreams and goals come second. He comes third. The woman, should she come into his life, comes fourth. A man who hasn't come to a place of understanding his purpose, who doesn't have strong dreams and goals, who was feminized, grew up without a masculine strong presence, will pedestalize the women in his lives, and he will elevate them from fourth to first. So you tend to find he will say anything and do anything. He will chase over the woman, and he will stay in the relationship for 3, 4, 5 years. And the woman therefore thinks, well, I have a man in my life of significance, and he has been here with me. However, if you were to take that man and place him amongst men and just step back, very quickly, any neutral observer will say, well, the man in your life has not come of age. In the hierarchy of men, he's still very low. So whilst he might lord over you, the fact that you haven't accepted a proposal from him indicates that you can recognize that whilst he might be a good man, might have a good character, might be kind and loving. He is not a man that you admire, respect, and honor. You might love him. But you also acknowledge by your actions that you recognize that amongst other men, he's perhaps lower in terms of the hierarchy. And this is where you find women who say things such as, I'm dating this great guy, but he doesn't meet A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. There's always something. Why? He's not one of those. So women remain single or stay unmarried, either single or unmarried but in a relationship, and remain therefore on the marketplace because they haven't met a man of value and because they don't understand and know what men want. Now, it's a simple way to understand this. It's very simple. We go back to the product. Demand, supply. If there are too much supply of a particular item and low demand, the price has to fall. So the first question is a simple one. Your value to a man from a man's perspective is hidden in the price you're asking for. Your value from a man's perspective is assessed using several, what I might use, heuristics or techniques. Sometimes it's qualitative and sometimes it's quantitative. But in principle, irrespective of whether a man is looking for simply sex, in other words, in the sexual marketplace and in the dating category, or looking for relationships, the first thing he looks at is your sexual marketplace value, how attractive you are. It's purely based on your natural looks. Your age plays a part. If you were 22 and you were ranked a 9, you had beauty, you had chastity, you had youth, you had fertility, you had all of the feminine traits. You cannot be a 9 at 34. You just cannot, because as you age, that number drops. So the first thing is to understand what you rank and how you rank amongst men. You might think of yourself to be a 9, but the question is not what you think of yourself. The question is, what does the customer, in this particular case, the customer being a man, as a result of desiring a woman and consuming whatever the woman produces and brings to the relationship, the question is, what does the consumer consider valuable? And how does the consumer rank the product? A woman has to understand how men rank other women. The key distinction, however, is in the data marketplace, our tolerance for sex is so low. A man will mate with a woman who is a 2 or a 3, depending on how horny he is. But when it comes to marriage, you might find he jumps from a 3 to a 7 as a minimum standard for long-term relationships. Firstly is your sexual marketplace value. That is your currency of exchange. That is the currency that gets you in the door. It doesn't keep you in the room. Key question is first, if you want to be influential, get in the room. If you want to remain influential, when you get in the room, you need to exercise some knowledge of the ability and the power to influence. Your sexual marketplace value gets you in the door. The second is your reproductive fertility value. If the man in question wants to have kids, then your age plays a role. It doesn't matter how attractive you are. You might be 50 and very attractive. That's great. But if a man wants to reproduce, the key question is, yes, you are pretty. Yes, sexually I desire you. Yes, but can life come out of you? Can you bring my loins, my seed, to the next generation? If the answer is no, then suddenly your overall ranking drops. You might be a 9 in beauty, but if you cannot reproduce, suddenly your reproductive fertility value could be a 3. And suddenly what you aggregate as your sexual marketplace value and your reproductive fertility value drops down to maybe average, a 5. Now, the third is your non-sexual marketplace value. Very, very important part. Your attractiveness, your looks get you in the door. It gets attention. With your looks, you can get attention. With your non-sexual marketplace value, what you get is retention. You get to compete. All things remaining equal, 7 women, all attractive, all 9s and 10s, same scale. The choice we make as men shifts. 7 women, all of them ranked as a 9, all of them 25 years old. we move to a third selection criteria. Who turns me off? With her attitude, with her behavior, with how she communicates, with her decorum, with a digital avatar and how she presents herself to the world online, with her empathy. Your non-sexual marketplace value deals with all of the things that makes you a woman. Effectively, it's your soft power. How feminine are you? How friendly are you? It deals with whether you were trained to be a wife, because men who seek wives go looking for wives. They don't go looking for women, although some do, but generally speaking, they are not looking for women who they can teach, or men who looking for women who will learn on the job. Men, when they are ready, go looking for wives. One of the qualities of a wife is a servant's spirit. The reason being, if the man wants to have kids, it's a thankless job sometimes to be a parent. Because for the first few years, you're given all this love and you're not getting anything in affirmation to validate the effort you're putting in. The feeling of reciprocity comes from what you can see as your effectively offspring, and that replenishes you. But you have to be willing to serve a child for the first few years. You need a servant's spirit, and that servant spirit comes from people who have been raised and trained and groomed, oh, that's the wrong word, educated to be wives, to understand the role of a man, the purpose of a man, the importance of a man in the family, and more. The key part of what I'm saying as far is a simple one. Women who understand the importance of their soft power, their non-sexual marketplace value, bring something different to the interaction. They have chastity, they have a level of decorum that is in keeping with femininity, they bring a level of serenity to the space. They have a servant spirit, a kind heart. They have etiquettes. They speak well. They are ladies. Now, I'm going to do a session where I talk about women, females, wives, and ladies. Now, most women are definitely females. Fewer women are wives, whether officially or not. Even fewer women are ladies. Your non-sexual marketplace value is how you retain a man. Because generally men simply want three things. S's: sex, servitude, and serenity. Peace. The key thing is peace. A woman who can give a man peace will always win. Because here's a simple word of encouragement to women, generally speaking. If you are a good woman and you are in the marketplace and you've been there for a while, one of three things are possible. Number one, you price yourself too high. You have no awareness of what your actual sexual marketplace value from a man's perspective is. Two, you price yourself too high. You do not know and have not correlated your age to your reproductive fertility value. You do not know whether the man in question wants to have kids and how important it is to him. Number three, you're not feminine enough. The femininity as a proxy is your non-sexual marketplace value. With your beauty, you can attract any man. With your presence, you can attract any man. With your attitude, with your femininity, you can retain any man you want. And here's a key part of the whole process. A woman's beauty will never be sufficient to keep a man from going astray. His conscience does that. But whilst the woman can be very beautiful, she can lose her husband and her man to a woman who is less beautiful than her, but has more of a feminine disposition. In other words, sexual marketplace value, though important, gets you in the door. Reproductive fertility value varies. Some men want to have kids, so that will play a part. Some don't. Therefore, it doesn't play a part. But the key thing is actually your non-sexual marketplace value. Men will go down in their preferences for sexual attractiveness and select a woman that has a much higher non-sexual marketplace value, a feminine value. Femininity, good character, good morals, chastity, decorum, a woman who has good etiquettes, a woman who actually has been trained to be a wife. So what you then have is, you could be average as a woman, scoring a 5, and next to you is a woman who is a 9. Don't fear. if you can overcompensate in your non-sexual marketplace value, if you're feminine, if you have a servant spirit, if you bring peace and serenity to a man's life, and if she brings chaos, if she's too masculine, which is partly the reason why most women sit on the shelf for much longer, is they're feminine in their hardware, but they're masculine in their software. Over the past 3 generations, women have taught their daughters and raised their daughters to be harder women and raised their sons to be softer men. So what you find is women who are masculine and disagreeable. I have been in interactions with people where all it takes is a trigger, all it takes is a conversation. And the woman who is dressed like a lady, speaking like a lady, suddenly gets triggered. And then you get to see the pathology of most modern women. They use words that demonstrate the actual software makeup. You see them being very disagreeable, speak like men, have mouths like sailors, speak in a louder voice, just want to argue for the sake of it. And when they cannot win based on logic, data, statistics, and facts, you then see them bring forward what the suffragettes and the feminist movement empowered women with, which was, you begin with anger, but you cannot stay in anger because you can't fight a man on anger. But you can always win by soft power. Shame him, insult him, make him feel guilty, and hold your ground. Shame, insult, guilt, and the necessity and need to be right. Men will choose an average woman with an average sexual marketplace value, but a higher non-sexual marketplace value because she's feminine, compared to a woman with a very high sexual marketplace value, but a horrible personality, a horrible attitude, bad decorum, and therefore a low non-sexual marketplace value. Your value as a woman, therefore, as I conclude today's session, is always hidden in how you're perceived and seen from a man's lens. Now, I'm not suggesting in any way you should walk around asking every single man what your ranking is or what your value is. I'm saying if you aggregated all of your friends and you drew a best fit line, a regression line, you will find that if men were to choose, let me end today's session with a useful example. If you've been on a runway show, whether that be bikini modeling or any form of modeling, semi-naked, what you find is that women are lined up and they're allowed to walk and they're allowed to parade themselves. And a number of people on the table, the judges' table, are choosing the most attractive. They're doing so based on a criteria. Eventually, you go from 100 women down to 50, down to 10, down to the top 30. What tends to happen is the people who are the judges are scoring the women. And eventually, there's a consensus amongst the judges as to who the most attractive woman is. She then becomes a benchmark, because by winning first place, you're simply saying the person who won 100, the 99th person was not as attractive as the first. So when men judge women, generally speaking, what you're looking for is a consensus. One man might score you a 7, another man might score you a 6. But what you get is the aggregated score. The key distinction is a simple one. Do not ask men what they would score you on the sexual marketplace, because our threshold for sex is so low. When it comes to dating, men will score you as high as possible and will say anything as possible to meet your ego needs. The key question on the table, and perhaps a useful way of knowing how much you score, is a simple form. How many proposals have you received in the past year from men who you admire, men who you respect, and men who you honor? And those men have to be honored, admired, respected by other men, and considered to be a peer and actually high up in the hierarchy. How many proposals for marriage have you received from those men? If the answer is none, what that is suggesting is that you need to recalibrate how you perceive yourself to be, because it simply indicates that the men are out there, but you've priced yourself too high. and men are refusing to exchange what they have, which is their lives and what they bring to the table, with what you are. You have to take stock and make some changes. The first part is always to just get a good understanding of your score. What do you score? And the key thing, remember, as I've talked about, as I close, I've talked about 3 different criteria. The one thing I haven't talked about is your economic intrinsic value. Your education, how much you earn, the job you have, how much wealth your father has, how much savings you have, all of that plays no role to men of value. Men of a certain level do not care about your earnings or your education or your intelligence. It does not play into the whole picture. And what women make the cardinal mistake of is they simply say, well, I'm educated. I studied in Oxford University. I'm from this family and of this social class. I have this great job. I make good money. I'm independent. I'm driven. I have my goals and dreams. Therefore, my success, my social status means I am attractive. And the men are sitting there thinking, we don't really care about all of that. We care about how you look naked in your natural state. We care about your age and how young you are if we want to have kids. And we care about your behavior and your mannerisms. I have to like you, or the man is thinking, I have to like you way after sex. It's not about what happens in the bedroom. It's about what happens after foreplay and after sex. And whilst I might find you attractive, maybe I desire you for no more than 1 hour or 2 hours or 1 weekend or 2 weekends or even 1 year or 2 years. But I have no desire to be bonded with you forever. And that is the reason why most women remain on the shelf, good women, no proposals, and they are left wondering, what is wrong with me? So, in closing, let me leave you with my final statement. This might be very, very hard to hear. You need 3 things. Humility. Key question is, can you be humble? Can you be humble? Acceptance. Can you accept what may seem like a very distressing statement, conversation, or session? Can you be a good receiver? Number 3. Can you receive? If you can be humble, and if you can appreciate what you've listened to, and if you can receive what you've listened to, then what happens is that you can take the information, you can go away, you don't have to make a change. You go away and you let the information process in your mind for a number of days, sometimes months. And the key part of what you're looking for during the processing phase is a simple one. Can this information, in part or in full, help me achieve my goals? If the answer is yes, it doesn't matter what was said. It doesn't matter how it was said. As a matter of fact, if you do not like the speaker, shut your eyes and let the resident speak. Take the information and apply it. Fail fast and fail early. You don't have time to waste. You cannot do the whole dating thing as a woman by trial and error. There's a formula for success. Success leaves behind clues. Take the clues, implement the clues, get around men, study men, understand what we want, interact with us, take the feedback you receive and implement it. And if you do, maybe you will remain a good woman, but you will find yourself off the marketplace and with someone you find that you admire, someone you respect and someone you honor, and you find yourself in an emotionally significant relationship, ideally marriage. I wish you all the best.